It should be noted, carefully pondered, and accepted that the law of one is available to any social memory complex which has decided to strive together for any seeking of purpose, be it service to others or service to self. The laws, which are the primal distortions of the law of one, then are placed into operation, and the illusion of space-time is used as a medium for the development of the results of those choices freely made. Thus, all entities learn, no matter what they seek. All learn the same, some rapidly, some slowly. End of quote, and that was from the raw material, The Law of One. Hello, friends and fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice Podcast. My name is Elle. This week, I had a discussion with a friend who was asking me some questions about spirituality, and we've never really talked on this level before, so it was quite interesting to see what kinds of questions that he asked to me. Believe it or not, this led me to having lots of things to say. I know, right? I'm just so quiet. So I thought it would be potentially valuable to recreate these questions and my attempts at answering them. So today, that's what we're going to do. I'm basically just going to go over these questions that I was asked, and I will attempt to answer them as if I was answering him. And the questions that he mainly asked me are something along these lines. So 1, what started you on your path of seeking? 2, what is the point of all of this? What did you learn? What has it given you? 3, what happens when you die? And 4, how does karma work? And more specifically, can someone do something that they consider good but is actually bad or evil? How does that whole thing work? So if you stick around and listen around to this whole thing and wait till the end, you might actually be able to get something valuable out of this. Even if you know a bunch of it, maybe there's something that may fall out of my mouth in the spontaneity of my ramblings that may assist you, and I hope that it does assist you and serve you well. So let us begin with number 1, which is what started you on your path of seeking? And of course, there isn't going to be one particular answer, because who knows what really started you on your path? Are you not always on the path to some degree just because you weren't consciously on the path before and now you are now? When did it actually start? So first of all, the answer is who really knows? But in a more specific answer, I started seeking because of sort of a near-death experience. Now, my near-death experience isn't as dramatic as some other people's are. It's actually pretty chill, but it still was a near-death experience, which led me to then sort of ask these sorts of deeper questions. So what happened? It was something like around the time I was 19 or 20. I am heavily into skateboarding, and I did that a lot, and I had a cut in my hand from skateboarding, and then I just kept getting it reopened from falling on it, and it got dirty and infected, and then I had some weird color in my vein, which was obviously concerning. So I went to the doctor. They gave me some antibiotics to help me, not die. And what do you know? I was better, right? So they gave me 2 kind of antibiotics. And then what happened was one of them I had an allergic reaction to, and it sort of made me like a hemophiliac for a time, meaning that if I cut myself, I would basically just bleed, and then I wouldn't stop bleeding, which is a concern, obviously, especially as a skateboarder who falls and hits their arms and legs and stuff a lot. It was a bit of a big deal. So I was told to, the blood work person phoned me, and they told me you should go to emergency right now. And I went there, and I spent a week in ICU, and they kind of hooked me up on steroids and reversed my immune system until I was back and had my platelets in my system and could be a healthy me individual. But what had happened was that my family had come down to visit me, because obviously they were concerned that I might not be making it through that, right? So I had moved away after graduation, and so my family had come to visit me, just specifically my mom and my stepdad, and at night we were chatting with some of my friends that were over, and it had come up, what is God, or what do you think of God, and what is all of this stuff about? And I sort of had an answer, because I had, pondered this thing briefly before in my 19 years up until that point. However, because nobody else in the room sort of had a particular answer that seemed to satisfy me, and the fact that I didn't really have an answer that satisfied myself either, that seemed to be the start of me searching out these types of answers. And what do you know? How it really started was actually to read other people's near-death experiences. So I originally got into this sort of spiritual seeking by reading a bunch of near-death experiences on NDERF.org. I believe it's Near Death Experience Research Foundation.org. And so what this website does is they basically just have thousands and thousands of accounts from people who have died, like either from a heart attack or a bad accident or whatever, right? But they had essentially been physically dead, like medically dead, and then they have maybe had their heart restarted, or maybe they were in a coma and they've died, but anyways, they've died and they've come back for whatever reason, like drownings, all those types of terrible things that can happen. And what happens when all these different people die is, well, obviously their stories aren't exactly the same, but what you'll sort of start to see if you read a bunch of these stories is there are consistencies across their stories. Although everyone's perception is unique and everyone's experience is unique, there are still sort of flavors of the situation that you can pull from their stories that are the same across stories. So you have thousands and thousands of these stories. Obviously didn't read all thousands of them, but I read a lot of them, and over and over you get these ideas that basically they die, they seem to be somewhere dark. It's sort of like they've gone into one of those intermediate planes, and usually what happens is like there's darkness and negativity and like even like sort of like evil entities like grabbing at them and like trying to like pull them into the dark. And usually what happens in like almost all of these stories is there's either somebody, like some voice, or just something in their heart or like that they know that just sort of says like, just ask, like just ask like for help or ask for the light, or it's usually something around free will and just having the person be like, I believe in light, and then they usually say like, and then there's like a light that appears, and they tend to sort of go towards the light. Now, of course, not all of those stories are exactly the same, but there is commonalities across them, and they tend to be, what happens is that these people have an interaction, which I would suggest is probably with their higher self, but it can take on any form that sort of works for their brain and their perception to be able to process this experience. And usually what happens is that they're told that, hey, your time isn't quite up. You probably you have the free will to do whatever you want, so if you would like to sort of stay here, you're probably gonna have to reincarnate and relearn some of these lessons again, or here you are now, right now you have the choice. You can go back and try to learn the lessons that you're here to learn, for you have unfinished business, my friend. So, of course, we wouldn't hear their stories if they didn't come back, so that's something to consider, right? That these are only stories of people who have sort of gone and then come back to tell us their version of these stories. But once again, the commonalities across them lead me to believe that there is something more to life than just what we see, which is a lot of these people's stories too. They maybe weren't even spiritual people, not even religious people, but they find themselves in the sort of metaphysical reality that is what it is, and it's true, and it is something that exists, and therefore they have that experience and they bring it back and try to communicate it to us so that so that we may better understand ourselves and can hopefully waken ourselves up from from our slumbers, from our forgetting. So let's go now on to sort of question number 2, which is, what is the point of all this? What has it given you? What have I learned? And in order for me to explain this answer, I'm going to have to get into sort of some of the metaphysical principles, or just the sort of like how creation works, and in terms of unity, in terms of oneness, and all of that. But I'm going to start by just saying that, what is the point of all of this? What has it given me? Well, because I want to start with something important. Well, it has given me purpose. So if you ever been depressed in life, or down, or not sure, or lost, and what is it usually that you maybe find that you're lacking? And well, I would suggest that is purpose, because when you have purpose, then you have a reason sort of to do the things that you do. You have a reason to live. Everything somewhat makes sense because there's purpose behind every action and word and deed and thought that goes through that brain and mind, body, spirit complex of yours. And so how did I find purpose? What gives me purpose? It is the understanding of the unity of creation, and that if we are one, everything is the creator. Everything comes from, if you want to consider sort of like the Big Bang, even if your mind likes to rationalize and see things analytically, theoretically, like mine does sometimes, then we have all been sort of born from the great big bang, and you can consider that like oneness, the creator. And so what is infinity? Well, they explain the Big Bang like it is a fine, a super fine, dense point in the creation, and there's almost nothing outside of that at that point. And what does it do? That single point explodes out, and it creates the creation. And so I would consider that is essentially the creator sort of exploding into itself, right? Sort of exploring an experiment in manyness, in finiteness, in itself growing in an infinity. However, it's still sort of manifesting all these, a bunch of finite points within infinite growth growing out. And I should have gotten the quote ready, but I can usually just kind of give it from my head in general from the Law of One material, which they talk about unity and infinity. So if you have infinity, this Big Bang, this universe that's continually growing, every time you try to measure it, you can't measure it. There's no measurement to be made, because once you've measured it and said, aha, it is this big, well, it has outgrown you by the time you go to state how big it is. And that's why we use the word infinity, because it just keeps going and going and going. And so they say infinity has no referent or meaning or purpose if you consider it that way. It is better to consider it as unity, as one thing, right? So no matter how big it gets, no matter complex and distorted it gets, it is still born from one thing, that one infinity, that one infinite creator. Which leads us to talk about the nature of creation and the way that at least I understand it from the Law of One material, and how this will eventually lead us to service, in that the purpose that I have gained from this spiritual seeking is that it has pointed me in the direction of service. In other words, I understand now that reality and this whole experience is about service, and we were going to go into what that is specifically, but it is in sort of duality terms, in either service to others or service to self. So we're going to have to explain what is the creation. Well, the creation is, from my understanding, an octave. So like the Big Bang explodes into a new octave is our existence. An octave like a guitar, you have the 7 strings on a guitar, but if you play all 7 together, that is sort of like an octave, or at least this is how my understanding is. I'm sorry, my music mechanics aren't as adept as maybe my spiritual understandings are, but you're getting the point, I'm sure. Okay, so each string on the note is sort of like a dimension or a density, but the whole universe together is an octave. Okay, so the octave that we live in, you could consider the creation and that Big Bang like a heartbeat. It's the creator created itself so that it may know itself better. And so what it has done is it has gathered itself into this sort of space-time continuum, into this illusion, and has, exploded out into creation. And so what is creation is basically like all of us, the creator, everything is almost like in the central sun in the middle, and it sort of explodes out into the far reaches of infinity and creation, and it goes out in free will and distorts itself and has many experiences. And just like the heartbeat that, pushes the blood out of your body and goes through the creation of your body and the mind-body-spirit complex and goes and does its stuff out in the creation, only then to eventually, come back into the heart, right? To come back into the creator and to be reabsorbed back into all. And that is sort of the nature of our creation, is the way I understand it. So the octave then is split into 7 densities, and we could talk about what all those densities are, and I may go into it a little bit, but I want to keep it simple as to where our experience is right now, and our experience is currently in the 3rd density. So let's then talk about sort of what is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd density, because that is a little bit complex. So the 1st density, and these are sort of my opinions, but these is what the Law of One says, at least from my perception. So I could get some of this wrong, okay? But the 1st density is like a timeless state. So the creation was made and it exploded out, and there's dust and rocks and space, but basically it took a long infinity of time, almost a timeless measure is what they say, to have all of that coalesce into sort of rhythms, in which case then planets were born, right? It's almost like the dust forms into planets as sort of the rhythms of the universe start to flow and do their thing, then the planets are created. So the planets is like the 1st density consciousness. And I guess what I'm describing is the evolution of consciousness. So you have the planets, right? And how does a planet be conscious? Well, it doesn't really at first. It's sort of just rock and stuff. So what happens is the earth and the air and the fire water all interact and create movement. And that movement then is like sort of the most base layer of consciousness. It's like that movement is the beginning of consciousness, where consciousness is started to stir and to create things and to interact with one another, creator experiencing creator through earth, air, wind, and fire. And what happens eventually then? Well, yes, the consciousness evolves into sort of the second density, which is sort of the plant and animal consciousness. And I would maybe go into what is the third density consciousness, the human. It's more like the I. It's an individual, because now let's step back into the second density consciousness. How do most animals see themselves? They see themselves as a group consciousness, right? You know, they have schools of fish and and birds, flocks of birds, and they tend to congregate in groups. And so my understanding is that the second density isn't behind the veil. They still are connected to the sort of the knowing that they are part of a one infinite creator, and they somewhat, I would say, instinctually just know their part in the creation, and they aren't completely lost and don't know what they're doing like we are doing, because that leads again into the third density. And what the third density consciousness is that from the animal plant consciousness, it then evolves into an individual, into an I, into a me. Right? Before it was like a we, and now it is a me. So, right, we take the W-E, invert it, and you got the M-E, we to me. And this is an illusion in a way, right? So what we're doing when we go into the third density is we are experiencing what is it like to be separate. Why would we need to be separate? Well, we need to pretend to be separate so that we have free will. Because if you knew, sort of like the animals did, about how we are absolutely connected to the creator, and your consciousness is a consciousness of infinity, and it will never die, and you will go on in some form forever. And if you knew that, then you wouldn't be as invested in this experience, versus when right now, how we don't know that. We go behind this veil, we go behind this forgetting, we forget who we are, we forget our connection to the creator, and we do all of that so that we can make a pure choice about how to serve, because that's what this third density consciousness is about. It's about learning the ways of love and learning how you wish to serve, which goes back to my original number one part about giving me purpose and what is my service. So remember how I was talking about the unity of oneness? Well, in this oneness, there are sort of two ways to perceive the universe. There is, and the creator neither blinks at the dark or the light. It essentially allows both of these services, both of these choices to play out based on the free will individual making their decisions. And so what are those two perceptions, the two ways to view unity? My understanding is there's the service to others and the service to self path. So the service to others is a little easier in that you see yourself as the creator, you see all other selves as the creator, and you are somewhat metaphysical equals, right? It's not that like you're more important than somebody else. It's that, I'm here to serve the creator. We are all the creator. And so whether I'm serving somebody else or serving myself, we are both the creator, and therefore I seek to serve others, but essentially seek to serve the creator. Now, if you would now go down the strict service to self path, I like to say that it is one of separation, and that you can see the unity of the universe, but you can see in the service to self path, they like to see themselves as the creator. It's like, well, sure, I'm the creator and other people are the creator, but why shouldn't I control everything in my life to maximize my experience? Why can't it be about me? And right, that ego, that separation, okay? And technically, those are both correct, aren't they? Right? Because we are all the creators, so why can't somebody choose to serve themselves? And that's true, but if we bring it back to the service to others perspective, service to others includes service to self, does it not? Right? Because as you serve the self, you take care of yourself, you're able to take care of others, but the same thing, you take care of others, and often that gives you purpose and meaning, and that also serves yourself. So it's like a wonderful thing that goes both ways on the service to others path, but on the service to self path, because it's one of separation, it's sort of one that's constantly at odds with itself. where it seeks to serve itself, and it goes out, and in serving itself, it obviously sort of tramples on the free will of others. And as it tramples on the free will of others, it sort of causes like some karmic kickback. And normally, maybe you and me, when karma comes at us, we like to think about what caused that. What could I do to not have that, to basically not create that friction between me and someone else that creates this karma. But they don't really care about that. They care about like conquering the karma. It's like, okay, so I've done this, and now this is happening to me because we are one, and the universe is giving me my sort of karma. Well, they think, well, I must control this karma. It's just another test, another level, another thing to conquer. Whereas you and I would likely see it on the service to others perspective as, oh, I have made a mistake. Karma has come to kick me in the ass. What can I learn? How can I be more humble? How can I be a better person? How can I be more loving, more kind, etc., more patient, all those types of wonderful things. So those are the two ways to see the universe. One, which sees you and all others as the creator. You get to go out and serve others, serve the self. It's wonderful, right? Or you can choose the service to self path. You can basically do the work of separation, of ego, of, it's all about me. And in that, it can get pretty dark, because as you attempt to go down that path, right, the ways of separation is essentially what the Satanism thing is all about. So, choose your path wisely, I would suggest. But I'm not here to tell you about the service to self path, really. I just need to mention it so that you understand the sort of mechanics of the creation. But I would go back to, why does service then give me purpose? Well, I already explained it, right? Service to others results in service to self. So as I attempt to serve you guys and to serve the creator the way I see, that helps me, like what has helped me is the law of one. And so I like to share my law of one perspectives with other people. And in sharing it with you guys, it gives me purpose. It gives me reason to wake up in the morning. It gives me, it gives me a lot. It gives me reasons to live. Like when things get dark, and you start to question and doubt a lot of things about this life, and because we're in a sort of dark place of forgetting, it always comes back to me just understanding that this is difficult, and I agree it's difficult. And so what has helped me is understanding these types of things so I can better understand myself, so I can sort of better serve others, etc., etc. I mean, just basically the more that I seek and sought, the more that it leads you to showing you that this is about service. However, I should highlight that, this service very much has to do with free will. The whole reason that we came here and forgot everything was so that we could exercise our free will. So you very much will be tempted and given reasons to doubt why all of this may seem to just be silly and I'm just making it all up. And the universe will often give you that choice. It will give you that choice to perceive the universe that way. But I would just suggest that if you do use your free will to persist in seeking what you know to be true, unity, love, truth, things of that nature, it will often, point you in the direction of service. And as Quo from different types of law of one material has said before, that if you seek to serve, you shall serve beyond your wildest dreams. And I must say that although it's not necessarily beyond my wildest dreams, it is pretty crazy that as I have oriented myself towards service more and more, the more magic that gets inserted into my life, the more, just interesting things happen. The more you see the unity and the oneness of creation, and you get to have the synchronicities, and you get to serve others, and it really, can bring your heart to a wonderful place, and you get to help somebody and do something good for them. Like, it just over and over again points you back to the ways of service, and in service gives you purpose, and in purpose gives you that joy, that joy of life that that so many of us sort of seek, and sometimes is so easy to just fall out of our hands, isn't it? So then, leading into sort of number 3 question, what happens when you die? Well, I believe I've kind of already went over this, but that's the idea, is that you are a mind, body, spirit complex. Remember I said you have 7 densities. You have also 7 bodies for each of those densities, right? So you have 7 densities, 7 bodies, just like the rainbow. As the light is refracted through the glass, right, it goes into 7 different colors, and that is, as above, so below. As metaphysical So it is in the physical. It's sort of a manifestation of the simplicity of the truth of that statement. So you have 7 bodies, and so I guess my answer to my friend when he says, "Well, what happens when you die?" I mean, basically, you just continue on. You're an infinity of consciousness who has chosen to incarnate in a third density mind body spirit complex body for a temporary amount of time so that you may learn the lessons that you wish to learn, and then you may move on. So what happens when you die? Basically, did you learn the lessons that you wanted to learn? And if you did, then great. Maybe it's time for you to move on to the next set of experiences in the 4th density, or maybe just like a higher grade of a 3rd density even. Or maybe, you didn't quite understand what was going on. You got lost in the test and that is all well, right? There's an infinity of patience. And so with that patience and that love, you were given the opportunity to reincarnate and to sort of try it again. And that maybe sounds a little tiresome to have to go through thousands and thousands of years of incarnations again, only to come to the end point at what they call sort of graduation time, and not miss the grade, but don't quite be so hard on yourself and thinking about it that way, and being worried about other people, what's going to happen with them, because the creator just gives you an infinite amount of time, just wants you to use your free will to do whatever it is you decide that you wish to do in your time. And so I've talked for a long time. Let me throw in a quote here. And so like I started this whole podcast with, that one quote, they were talking about how the law of one is available to any social memory complex who has decided to strive together for any seeking of purpose, be it service to others or service to self. The laws, which are primal distortions of the law of one, then are placed into operation, and the illusion of space-time is used as a medium for the development of the results of those choices freely made. Thus, all entities learn, no matter what they seek. All learn the same, some rapidly, some slowly. End of quote. From session 7.15. Which brings up a good point about, they mention, right, how all learn the same, some rapidly, some slowly. I will mention to you that all paths lead to the one, right? It is as if we have been given a blueprint or a map, and you get to choose which direction you go and which direction on the map you go. You can go and get lost over here, going there, but the ending is always sort of the same. So all paths lead to the one. No matter what choices, the blueprint to choose from is one and will always lead you back to the creator. Free will is more the aspect of time and how long it may take you to get to make those successive choices to end up where you're going to end up. So in session 71.13, they mention here, the questioner asks, then each entity is on a path that leads to the one destination. This is like the many, many roads which travel through the many, many places, but eventually merge into one large center. Is this correct? Ra answers, I am Ra. This is correct, but somewhat wanting in depth of description. More applicable would be the thought that each entity contains within it all of the densities and subdensities of the octave, so that in each entity, no matter whether its choices lead it, its great internal blueprint is one with all others. Thus, its experiences will fall into the patterns of the journey back to the original logos. This is done through the free will, but the materials from which choices can be made are one blueprint. End of quote. And so you can see how no matter what choices you make, no matter what kind of mistakes you might make, you are still choosing from the one internal blueprint that everybody else is connected to. And I think we like to think that we're capable of making mistakes that are sort of like impossible to fix, but then you don't understand the infinity of the creation and the creator, and that we like to think in finite terms, that there is one plan and only one plan, and if that plan doesn't go to plan, then everything's going to go to heck. But that seems to not be the way. It seems to be that you can almost just do whatever it is that you seek to do, and sure, you probably should be considering consciously what you're doing, but if you are going to be making sort of bad decisions and bad mistakes, eventually they will be corrected, because it's sort of just the nature of what is, that no matter how lost you get, no matter how out there in the forest you are, somebody will find you. Sort of like in those near death experiences where they're pulled into these deep, dark places only to just have that remembrance of that light, that little tiny light. And the more they focus on that light, the bigger and bigger it gets, and it grows and grows until it envelops them and they become one again with all. And oh, wow, I'm back here again. so, so don't worry too much. And another quote that I have about the infinity of the heartbeat of creation, which I've already explained to you, but I pulled all these quotes and then didn't read them to you because I was off on a ramble, but I'm going to read it to you now. So in session 19.1, they state, in the understanding which we have of the universe or creation as one infinite being, its heart beating as alive in its own intelligent energy. It merely is one beat of the heart of this intelligence from creation to creation. In this context, each and every entity of consciousness has, is, will, experienced, experiencing, experience each and every density. End of quote. I know that's ridiculous. They're basically just trying to say that because you are one, even as well, maybe I'll just make it super simple. At the end of the sixth density, or the end of the seventh density, as you reabsorb back into the one infinite creator, you eventually lose all identity and become one with all. As the Big Bang goes out and is sort of sucked back into a black hole, you can think of it very similarly as the infinite heartbeat. Sort of the pushing out is the Big Bang, and the black hole maybe is the pulling the heart, pulling everything back into it. But as you are pulled back into it, you become the singularity, right? You become everything. You become one with all, and therefore your experience is my experience, is everyone's experience, right? The illusion of separation between you and me right now, which you don't understand what's going on with me and I don't understand what's going on with you, those things all coalesce into one entity, right? The one infinite creator, and you get to be then everything. Which, how it's kind of easy when I'm saying that to visualize that now in like a later state, right? Well, why can't we visualize that right now and here? Like, why can't we just be in this oneness, right? But it's because the illusion is very convincing. The illusion of separation is very convincing. As much as we sort of try to persist to see through it, it will persist to challenge us and to confuse us, because that's how it was designed to be. And so be it. But just know that the more that you're tested and pushed, all is well. It should sort of become easier in a way, the more adept that you may come at it. Okay, so we're getting off topic here. Let's get into the last question here. How does karma work? So it would start with sort of a definition of karma. And look at me, I also didn't grab this quote. Oh my goodness, but I can pull it from my head quite well again. So karma is inertia. Those things which have been put into motion shall continue into motion until such a thing as a braking mechanism is invoked. And what might that braking mechanism be, my friend? In other words, what stops the wheel of karma? And that is forgiveness. But I will back up a little bit, because you might have gotten lost already with inertia. So what is inertia, right? Things that get put into motion. If I throw a ball, it shall move until something stops it. But let's think of it in a more metaphysical way. So say you have a sort of fight with somebody, okay? You have a fight with somebody, and you now are, you sort of created karma between you two, because, well, actually, what is karma? I should have given you this earlier. What is karma specifically? They mention in the Law of One material is when somebody is consciously unloving, which is a whole nother story. To be consciously unloving, you're creating karma. But let's bring it back to something more simple, okay? So say you're in a fight with somebody, you two are fighting, all right? And you think that the fight's over, but there's still, you're still holding on to it. Like, you haven't gotten over it, right? We use the word, I've gotten over it. Well, if you haven't gotten over it, that means that you haven't really forgived. And so it's as if you're holding on to something. You can feel it. If you haven't gotten over it, then you're holding on to it, right? It's still with you. And so basically, as long as something is with you or with somebody else, then that is karma between you. And that is essentially something that has begun because either some motion that you or the other person has done, right? The motion has been put into motion, and therefore it shall continue until you stop that which created it. And what stops it is forgiveness. So forgiveness, why would forgiveness do that? Because forgiveness helps you to let go. It helps you to truly let go, but it has to be forgiveness of self, right? Because obviously we are very hard on ourselves sometimes. So forgiveness of self, forgiveness of other selves, And, even the other person sort of has to, in a way, forgive you. Does that mean you can get stuck because somebody hasn't forgiven you? I don't know exactly. I mean, probably, but probably not. I would think it's more like you should probably do your best to attempt to make an apology and to, make an honest attempt at actually, really actually apologizing and forgiving somebody in a conscious way, and like bringing it up to them and giving them the opportunity to maybe do that back. But there is that thing called time that some people need. And so hopefully in time they may forgive you as well. But the idea is that karma is inertia, and inertia is stopped or braked by forgiveness. And so if you forgive yourself, forgive others, you may find some of the lessons that are very repetitive in your life may start to all of a sudden make sense. Maybe the reason why they're very repetitive is because you haven't quite forgiven something or someone, or I'm not going to try to put it into more than that, but it's usually right. Our whole life generally is like, hey, we probably haven't learned to forgive things in certain ways, and so the more that we are forgiving, the more that we can kind of clear up our karma, and we can focus on what it is that we are here to do, and which is to serve. And like our karma is mostly about what we're here to learn about ourselves, but it's sort of like karma is like they talk about a star seed, somebody who incarnates here to want to do well. But what if they come to do well and they create a bunch of karma for themselves, and now they've kind of got themselves sort of mixed up in this planetary energy, where what they really sought to do was to come here to serve others, to be an inspiration, a light and love, and hopefully lift others up and give them the opportunity to energize themselves, to awaken. That's generally the goal. And so if we're mucking about creating karma, then, like I said, you can't really go off of the path. All paths lead to the one, but there are more efficient ways than other ways, right? They say some more slowly than others. So, it's nice to be efficient, isn't it? It's nice to be efficient. So specifically, my friend's asking me, how does karma work? And they did ask me a more refined question about it. Like, can't somebody who thinks they're doing good be doing evil? And he kind of pitched me this idea of like, what if somebody worked in a hospital and they saw people suffering, and, in their perception, they thought they were doing good by, dare I say, like putting these people down. I'm just trying to avoid algorithmic trigger words, just so you know if I'm ever talking weirdly like that. So right. So what if that guy thinks he's doing good, and he's going around infringing on the free will of other people as he sort of ends them, right? Well, I would state what I answered with that is that's not really an easy question. It sort of goes down to the perception of the entity who is doing any kind of action or deed or thought, because two people can do the exact same thing. Like, let's not talk about like hurting somebody. Let's just talk about like just a general action, right? Two people can do a general action, and it could be completely different depending on the intention of the person behind what they're doing, right? Like, I could try to do something good for somebody and it might do good, but maybe when I'm trying to do good for them, I actually offend them, right? And so, oh my, right? It's mostly my intention that I've gone behind with it. Whereas, if I'm like a service to self person, maybe I go in to compliment somebody just so that I can manipulate them to get my way, right? So that would be like a sort of a negative intention, wouldn't it? Right? So I would say it's mostly about what is your intention? What is your path? Are you on the service to others path? Are you on the service to self path? If you're on the service to others path, you should be concerned with serving and loving and forgiving and acceptance. Really, it's mostly about acceptance. And if you're on the service to self path, it is often about control. You need to control everything within your realm because you think you're the creator and you think that you should control everything. And so you must, in order to be successful on that path, you must control everything actually to a very fine degree. So I suppose if I bring it back to what I said is, if you're on the service to others path, then you would be wanting to be consciously loving. And when you're consciously unloving, then you're basically going against your path, and you're sort of creating that friction and that karma. Okay, so now I hope that you understand some things. I mean, who the heck knows what you got from this? I thought, I start these podcasts and I feel that they're starting to go in a certain direction, and then I start to record it, and I really don't know sometimes where it ends up going completely. But I hope then you got a little bit out of that, sort of what's the point of all of this? How do we get some purpose through service? And how do most people even start seeking? Does it matter? How does karma work? But I think what I should probably leave you with is then sort of the most important quote, in my opinion, that I seem to constantly bring up and constantly repeat to others. And that is, what is the best way to serve? Because, of course, all of this stuff that I've just stated is wonderful, but you may ask yourself, or, like my friend kind of asked even, well, how do I find my service and how do I find my purpose? And my answer to that is that your service is always right in front of you. The unity of creation is such that what gives me purpose is knowing that sort of everywhere I go is just creator experiencing creator, creator serving creator. And so everywhere, in every moment, in every opportunity, I have a chance to serve. If it is maybe not like if I can't serve another person or like my animal, my pet or whatever, right? Then I'm like, oh, I'm just alone. Well, my friend, you as well are one, and you are the creator, and you can serve yourself in a loving way of unity, and that you deserve love, and that like the love that you want to give to others is sort of only as true and pure as maybe the love that you can have for yourself and show for yourself. And so service is everywhere. It's even just within being a good example of how to treat a human being, as in to treat yourself, right? How may you take care of yourself so that you may continue serving? But once again, being more specific, the service is going to be unique to you. There is no perfect answer that I can give you because you are a unique part of the creation. You're going to have to figure out what that is, but just basically keep a mind out for it. Keep your focus on maybe asking the question, what is sort of my more active service? And the more that you focus on that and the more that you will find answers, I promise you, because as you focus, you increase the will. The will increases your power, which brings things to you, my friend. And so in session 17.30, what is the best way to serve? Raw answers. The best way of service to others is the constant attempt to seek to share the love of the Creator as it is known to the inner self. This involves self-knowledge and the ability to open the self to the other self without hesitation. This involves, shall we say, radiating that which is the essence of the heart of the mind-body-spirit complex. Speaking to the intention of your question, the best way for each seeker in third density to be of service to others is unique to that mind-body-spirit complex. This means that the mind-body-spirit complex must then seek within itself the intelligence of its own discernment as to the way it may best serve other selves. This will be different for each. There is no best, there is no generalization, nothing is known. End of quote. And so I love that quote so much. Part of it that always sticks with me, that I always repeat to you guys, is seek to share the love of the Creator as it is known to yourself. What brings you joy, my friend? What brings you joy? Joy, joy, joy. I find joy in skateboarding. I find joy in nature. I find joy in spiritual philosophy. And so I have sort of modeled my life around those things at the moment, and those things may change. My service may change. Things may fall away. They may transform. That is sort of how I know the love of the Creator to myself. And as I seek to share it with others, I tell you, it brings a joy and a love and light to other people's world. Just to see somebody being joyful and happy and sharing it with others and just being like a radiant personality, I sometimes underestimate it. I wanted to make this podcast this week about the imposter syndrome and how I sometimes doubt myself and think like, who am I to be a loving spiritual person? Like, I'm just some guy, I'm just some skateboarder dude. Like, maybe I'm just making this all up so that I can feel like so cool and loving and better than other people, right? So I kind of get like this weird imposter syndrome about myself, and I'm sure maybe you do too. But I suppose after doing that for many, many years, I am slowly coming around to the idea that it's okay. It's okay to be a softie. It's okay to love and seek and serve others. the world, and some bully might make fun of you, and it doesn't matter. In the long run, you're going to know what feels right. You're going to know that service feels right. It's going to bring you joy and purpose, and I hope that it does, and I hope that you find your service. And once again, if you don't find that it's maybe as obvious as you hope it can be, then just work on yourself, right? Work on loving yourself and being a better lover and taking care of yourself. And as you do that, it's going to lead to you sort of getting out there, and you're going to radiate that oneness, that love of your healing, of you being a good, wonderful person. It's going to radiate out to others, and they're going to notice it, and they're going to want to connect with you, and try to figure things out with you. So just you do you, my friend. Try not to overthink it too much, but do remember that it is sort of the focus, and a steady focus on the things that you wish to know, that you wish to seek, that shall come to you, right? You knock on the door, and the door will open. You seek, and it shall come. And so I will leave you with that, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. If you appreciated this podcast, please give it a like. Feel free to leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear future ones, and if you find value in what I do, I would really appreciate it if you jumped on my Patreon or shot me a one-time PayPal. I do seek to just give all of this information for free as part of the spiritual philosophy. The very first question of Law of One is, was it freely given? Was your service freely given, my friends? That is for another time, another story, but I seek to give this in a free manner, and so I am open to free reciprocation from other selves who would like to lift me up, and that can feel that this is important for other selves. There's a number of you out there that do, and it really means the world to me that somebody can sort of put their money where their mouth is, and even though I don't fully offer you anything directly other than just this continual service that I'm attempting to provide, do know that it really, really, really reminds me of the faith and the love that is out there, and that I've maybe given, and then sometimes I need it, and you guys are there to give it to me, and I'm just so wonderfully grateful for all of that. So thank you guys. The1infinitecreator.com, and you can scroll down to the support section, and otherwise I shall be back again next week to ramble and rave about who knows what. So I love you guys. Take care.